this event is sponsored by Public Square. If you guys want to help win the culture war and support businesses that support our values, download the Public Square app. Check out businesses in your area. I really do mean it.
Both parties are working for the same special interests. You know, Big Pharma isn't just giving checks to one side or the other. The military-industrial complex is not just writing checks to Republicans. You have the major interests that control this country, then just utilize the parties to be their valets. And being a little bit better of a valet or the lead valet as opposed to the secondary valet is just not a game I want to win.
Donald Trump in the White House, he is not the creator of everything we see in the culture war, in our politics. He is an avatar of the anger of so many people. And you know what? When Donald Trump won in 2016, it was just the presidency. Meanwhile, Congress was still establishment. The Supreme Court was still establishment. And even right now, even with Trump's nominees, you still get a bit of that establishment. Thomas and Alito are pretty good. We're now seeing MAGA in Congress. And when they say the Republican Party's not unified, I'm like, good. It means there's some people who are actually representing me, at least, even if it is only a small handful of people.
You know when we were unified? When we passed the Patriot Act. You know when we were unified? When we went to war in Iraq. You know when we were unified? When we were willing to take people's liberties away during COVID. You know when we were unified? When we were printing money for extra COVID spending. Unity has brought some of the worst results. We need dissent. We need the opportunity for people to make a counter argument and then have the best ideas rise to the top.
I actually don't disagree with what you're saying there, because I don't know if you guys have read Musk's recent book. It's a phenomenal book to read, Walter Isaacson. One of the things he said, we had a culture that if you work with them, he said he's not a fan of camaraderie, because camaraderie prevents people from calling out each other's bullshit. So it kind of validates what you're saying. I'm with it. That's not what I know the enemy is the establishment. I fully understand it. But I also think we have to kind of get in to be able to impose the philosophies and ideas that we have. So going back to the question I was asking you, did you actually think you were going to get him to be the first to get fired? Did you actually think that was going to happen? Or were you like, look, I'm just trying to scare the crap out of him because he made a promise to me? Or you're like, no, we're getting rid of him?
I'd made an existential decision that I wasn't going to own him anymore. That there were a group of us that was large enough where if we weren't going to vote for him, one of two things was going to happen. The Democrats were going to own him, or he was not going to be the speaker anymore. And I was actually okay with either one of those results, because either is illuminating and either creates opportunity. So I had no foresight as to how the Democrats were going to act. I kind of had a feeling they were going to resent the fact that he'd lied to them just like he'd lied to us. But I went out pretty publicly in a number of interviews and just said, we're going to file the motion to vacate. We got enough Republican votes where he won't stay the Republican speaker. You guys either adopt him or ditch him. But either way,
and I'm not so sure it matters unity when it comes to electoral politics either. You're going to have people in their districts communicating and looking towards their single member of Congress. And there may be a rhino, as people would describe him, in some district. They're not going to blame their member of Congress for the actions of other members of Congress. They'll simply go to them and say, hey, we want the Republican to win and unify. Will you try and unify? Yes, I will. They're not going to vote Democrat because Matt Gaetz is arguing with them.
No, I don't disagree with that. All I'm thinking about is optics. I'm thinking about the voter. I'm thinking about, in every possible way, this is favoring conservatives to be able to win 2024 in every possible way. I was wondering if you did this thinking it was a way of scaring him, or you did this thinking he's going to get fired and that was the intentions. Because the reality of it is, what kind of helped you, Matt, is the fact that there was not a red wave in November of last year. If there was a red wave, you guys wouldn't have enough leverage to be able to get rid of him.
Well, it depends on who would have won. You know, if I'd have had Caroline Leavitt, Joe Kent, J.R. Majewski, some of these America First candidates that McCarthy starved of resources, and people who should have been there in Congress. If we'd have had those folks, maybe even a larger majority would have led to more people with the desire to push back against the traditional trajectory.
Didn't the GOP go against Blake Masters as well?
I know more about the House politics
than
the Senate politics.
It seems to be story after story that the machine itself will push out anybody who would end up actually trying to fight for change or what the American people care about.
Yeah, you think politics is bad, try the media.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, but you think about how what we're doing now. I mean, there was a great piece in Semaphore that came out today that talked about how what was remarkable about our efforts was that we were able to go around even traditional conservative media and even around Fox News. And the way we were able to do that was by utilizing podcasts, by using alternative media, by even utilizing opposition media. I did more consequential interviews on this subject on CNN than I ever did on Fox News. And I think that there's a fragmented environment in the media landscape right now that we have to be ready to seize on. The conservative media landscape has actually never been more there for the taking, I think.
I think the liberal media landscape as well. It's so devoid.
Yeah.
Really truth, I don't know what it is. If you can sense someone's soul when you look in their eyes, we need more of that. I don't know what it is exactly.
But like dogs can do that.
Yeah,
but
a lot
humans,
of animals can.
Right.
We talk about unity, and I agree with you guys, unity can be very dangerous. Like Hitler was all about unifying that country for horrible that means. So you want disparate unity, and I think it's the idea of God. I don't want to take it religious if we don't have to, but there is something we can unify under, which is consciousness. And then we just argue about everything else. That's the point.
It does feel sometimes that, like everybody in this room, I'm willing to bet, could have like a 3-hour conversation with you about their ideas, their proposed solutions, what they think works and doesn't. And then you look to these other audiences, typically the corporate press and the mainstream media, and these people will have no idea. I'll give you an example. How many liberals and leftists have come on Timcast IRL and I say, did you see the video of Joe Biden talking about withholding the $1 billion over the Burisma thing? And they go, no, what are you talking about? And I'm like, now, how do you not know that? It's a huge subject of the debate in politics. They don't know these things. It's almost like they're non-player characters. That's where the NPC meme basically comes from. And then you have people here who are gonna argue with us. In fact, what I love about Timcast IRL is our super chat corrects our errors real time. It's kind of crazy that it's such a robust community.
I need a super chat.
Yeah.
I wonder if AI can sort of aggregate me a super chat, kind of walk around Congress, and you guys can just correct all my mistakes.
My favorite recent example is not political at all. It's when Hassan Piker called Phil Labonte a failed musician guy who had just opened for Metallica, has a platinum record, 5 gold records, and it's a massive band. And what I find hilarious about it is, of course, Hassan could not say lead singer of All That Remains. He had to keep it as vague as possible because they need to keep their audiences misinformed or underinformed. Because if they actually were telling people what was going on, their ideas would be very different. But to go back to what Ian was saying, it basically feels like many of these people are not conscious. They're just along for the ride and not paying attention. It's almost like they're blue-pilled.
Like they're chasing the money?
No, like they're not awake. It's funny that they call themselves woke, but they're more asleep than anybody. The people who are awake are debating.
Well, but don't you just have to relentlessly confront those people with reality, and then you have to spice in enough energy to get eyeballs. I mean, we are all in the attention economy, right? I want your attention for my policy ideas and political goals. Advertisers want your attention to buy their products. News organizations want your attention to be able to sell to those advertisers. And I mean, I remember, what was it, when you dressed up like Osama bin Laden and went across the Rio Grande? You were able to use comedy and a viral video to make an argument that broke through that typical myopic.
I dressed like a terrorist, and I got the costume from Party City, and I swam across the Rio Grande.
How did that help you with TSA?
So this is we'll get to that in a minute. And this is like 9 years ago, and I swam across the river, and I was looking for anywhere for Border Patrol, and I found one, and I ran towards him, and he drove in the opposite direction. And then like a few months later, I was targeted at the border in Canada and harassed. But I think the solution is not political. What Matt does, I can't even opine on that. I think we need to, every one of you out there, and I've said this 100 times, you're the media. You are the journalists. And what people need to see is people need to see. Like, I can't imagine the conversations Matt has seen and witnessed in the halls of DC this week. And if those are recorded, like, people need to see it. And my problem is, as an investigative reporter, I get 100 legitimate people a day contact me with all types of problems. Please come to the welfare office in this state, expose this agency. But then when push comes to shove, they don't do it. Why? Because they're afraid. Because they're afraid to take that action, that they are afraid to go do it for fear of retaliation. We talked about this. I have a family, I have children, I have this, I have that. And I have to say, what type of world are your children going to grow up in if you do nothing?
They'll live in the pod and they'll eat the bugs.
They'll live in the pod and eat the bugs.
That's right.
If they're lucky.
If they're lucky, that's right.
And get myocarditis.
You never know. We might end
Yes.
you might end up doing nothing and things get great. I don't think it's going to happen that way. So there's no reason to be turned off or to use it as a fear. Not to be like, if you don't do anything, you'll be horrible. Horrible things will come. Like, you don't want to scare people, but
Why not? You don't want to scare people into action?
I would rather inspire them into action with an idea,
Carrot and stick.
with a direction. Like we could start pulling the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and converting it into graphene, reindustrialize, and then sell it all over the.
Wow.
really
By the way, if that doesn't inspire people, I don't know what will.
Oh, it's going to be
That's very
hot.
inspirational.
Yeah.
Carrot and stick, I think if there's I love using the burning building analogy, you have to explain fire bad, right? It's not like, hey, it's sunny outside with flowers and there's dogs and puppies. That's your incentive to get out of the fire. No, get out of the fire because you're going to die, right? So it just depends on the circumstance.
So do you think it's just we're in a situation where it's dire enough that it warrants using fear to motivate?
It is so dire. It is terrifyingly dire. Look, should we go? I mean, I used to do this list of all the fucked up shit they're doing, but now in the past couple of weeks, I mean, what they're doing in New York to Donald Trump, they are trying to seize his properties through this circuitous legal method where it's like, okay, we're suing Trump for $250 million. We summarily determine Trump overvalued his properties. Now we're determining in a trial whether or not he falsified records. If they're already saying a $500 million property, which actually is only 50, then any record created is falsified by their standard. They're then going to say, Trump, you're found liable for $250 million, and they're going to seize a $500 million property, mark it off as worth 50, and then say Trump owes another 200. This is what's literally happening right now. They've arrested Trump's lawyers. And a lot of people didn't even follow this. The lawyers who argued on Trump's behalf over 2020, which you are absolutely, in my opinion, required to do under this Constitution, a redress of grievances. If you feel you are wronged, you get your lawyer, you file the paperwork. That is the way you do it. And they sanctioned Trump's lawyers. In Colorado, 2 of them, $187,000, a collective $1 million for several other lawyers. Now, Jenna Ellis and several other lawyers are indicted. The dire is an understatement. If you look to history, Mike Cernovich is talking about the regime framing him for a crime and killing him. And a lot of people they say, okay, you're freaking out. It's a little crazy. I'm like, dude, would you have believed January 6th would have happened 6 months before? No one thought something like that was going to happen. Whatever your view is, a riot, peaceful protests on one side, it's still a shocking moment in history. If you said Trump's lawyers would be arrested, nobody would believe it. So when we have them trying to seize Trump's assets and destroy him with government power, I got to tell you, man, history dictates. I mean, or I should say history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And we are looking down the barrel of very terrifying shit. If you read, I think it's totally fair to say I did not read Solzhenitsyn, the Gulag Archipelago, but there's that famous quote I just posted, I've seen, where he mentions a guy, a military officer was being beaten, and he pulls out a knife and stabs the assailant, so he gets charged with murder for it. Mm-hmm. That's what it was like in the Soviet Union. And I'm like, well, that's really funny. That's literally happening here today.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.